And welcome to PMI's Uncommon Sense podcast, tools to improve your work forever. I'm Susanna Clark, Managing Partner with PMI, the performance improvement consulting and training firm. Our Uncommon Sense podcast is a 15-minute conversation with our expert consultants. They talk a lot of common sense, although much of it is not common practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. We want you to be inspired to improve your business through learning more about the tools which can help you succeed and grow. Welcome, everyone. I've got Niall Coney with me today, and we're going to talk about hypothesis testing. Hold on to your hats, everybody. Niall, it's great to have you with me. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me again.
So, hypothesis testing. I mean, I'm kind of feeling like it does what it says on the tin, but let's just make sure. So could you just give us an overview of the tool, please?
Yeah, it's one that often brings trauma to most people going through Lean Six Sigma. And even I know a lot of people have done it for many years who still fall foul of a lot of issues with it. But yeah, fundamentally, it is what it says on the tin, which is different means of testing, analysing to understand whether a given hypothesis is true or not. We usually just have to do it in a kind of scientific and measurable fashion. A lot of people kind of think theory and hypothesis are synonymous, and in many ways they are. But the reality is what we're trying to do in hypothesis testing is have a scientific, measurable idea that I can challenge, I can either prove or kind of disprove in a sense, and then collect data to build evidence for or against that hypothesis. And all the different hypothesis testing tools of all the different wonderful terms you'll hear within them, I go back to my simple analogy, are all just screwdrivers of different shapes and sizes. They're all there to do exactly the same thing. They're just better in different situations. No different, and one screwdriver is better for that screw than the other. It's exactly the same though.
Okay. And so, in terms of different scenarios that people might want to use this in, I wonder if you can give us some examples.
So there are countless. If anyone again is like me and likes academic research, you will actually see near enough anything in our society that runs day to day is built off hypothesis tests. Everything from medical trials to social experiments. The common thing that always comes up in hypothesis testing are things like p-values that people come across a lot. And if anyone picks up any literature, any research in the scientific or psychological fields, you name it, you will see p-values in it, and that's because it's the basics of their analysis. And so really, it's sometimes better asking what can't you use it with, in a sense. But in reality, it's all about comparing a data set to another data set or a series of additional data sets or a reference value, and effectively trying to answer the question, is that data that I'm seeing or the effect that I'm seeing actually because something has changed, or was it just chance? And it adds kind of statistical robustness to it. And that's effectively what our hypothesis test is trying to answer. That thing that you're seeing in that data, is that really because something has changed, or is it actually just kind of pot luck? And actually I would draw your attention somewhere else.
Okay. Interesting. I don't think I've ever heard it described in that way before. I really like that, as in the change or chance, which sounds obvious now you said it, but actually I've just never heard it described that way. So that's really helpful. So I also picked up that you talked about different means. So there are a number of potential iterations here that you might try different types of hypothesis testing depending on what you're looking at.
Yeah, so again, they're all just different screwdrivers for different situations. So depending on your situation, pick the right screwdriver for the job. So if I'm trying to compare two data sets to one another to see if they're different, and when we say, are they different, what I'm really asking is, those two things, I might have, say, changed something in the middle, and I want to see if it's done anything. Right, so what difference I am seeing, is that because I've actually made the difference, or was it just chance? In other words, I've not really made much of a difference, even if I think I have. Probability says that could have just happened by sheer luck. Don't rush onto that one yet. So if I'm just comparing two, I could be looking at something like a 2-sample t-test. If I just want to compare one data set like customer satisfaction scores to an industry average, I could look at a 1-sample t-test or or z-tests if I know my standard deviations, all the way through to attribute data. If I'm trying to compare defective percentages between two things, I could use things like binomial or Poisson rate comparisons. Or if I've got more than two sets, I can use things like chi-squared. So even though the terminology becomes complex, again, the reality is they're all trying to do that determination of compare some data sets and the differences or the effects that you're seeing. Is that because of what's actually changed between them? Or is that more just probably potluck or chance in a way? And all it is those different tools are just better for different data sets and slightly different analysis of the same thing. So attribute, I will use chi-squared. Variable, I would use like 2-sample t's, for example, to make it kind of missing out nuance there, but that's the kind of simplicity of it.
I needed some advice one time within PMI that was related to some data which we were plotting on a control chart, and this and it wasn't showing me the signals. I was expecting, we'd made some changes and I was expecting to see signals. Things were getting better. And I remember talking to Dennis Cromentine-Marsh, many of you will know him, and he did some hypothesis testing for me to try and show me that I was just fundamentally deluded and that the control chart was absolutely telling me the right thing, which was that the change I'd made had made no difference whatsoever. And it was a very good lesson for me, actually, to be aware that there were other things that could confirm, even if you're looking at data and you're doubting yourself, then what else might I be able to use? And that was really
but that's an interesting point you raised there, because actually when we talk about control charts and we have control charts that are there, as we dip into that, we kind of see that they're there to help us identify those occurrences that probably haven't happened by chance, i.e. something changed. Something has shifted and we need to investigate it. Now, we know it's not always right, but that's the premise of it, fundamentally. And so, once again, it goes back to my point that all statistics are all based off the same thing. And it is, a control chart is there to go, those points that sit outside those control limits or other patterns you might look within it, based on all knowledge we know about the world and physics and biology, they just don't make sense from a probability point of view. It's very rare that would happen. Hence, I'm going to flag it so you can go and have a look and make sure you don't miss anything. Hypothesis testing is effectively trying to do the same thing. Now I'm looking for that difference and going, right, well, is there one that's actually a difference based on probability? Or actually would probability say, no, you would probably see that anyway. And that's kind of what your hypothesis tests are there to do. So it kind of reiterates that point that they're all connected in many ways. They're not different tools, they're just presented differently.
Yeah. Any advice that you would give to people who were looking to investigate using this tool, and in particular common mistakes, I guess, things that you've seen go wrong and that you want to make sure people don't make the same mistake?
I guess, first of all, I think to try to simplify and kind of demystify it again, because like we said, hypothesis testing is something that can seem really complex. And in reality, actually, I tend to say it's quite simple in many respects. If you and your organisation has ever done this, and we all have in some way, where let's say we've made an improvement or a change or a system change, and we put together like a little bar chart that says, right, on average, here's where we were before, on average, here's where we were afterwards. It's a big change, well done everyone, pat on the back. And in a sense, what I'm saying is things like a 2-sample t-test is effectively analysing that, but just with robustness. Because when you put some data into Excel and put it into a bar chart, that's fine if you know what you're doing, but actually Excel doesn't tell you about all the assumptions underneath that. It doesn't tell you that you should have a certain sample size to be sure about this. It doesn't tell you that difference you're seeing, is that actually because you've done something, or actually would you probably see that by chance anyway? It doesn't tell you any of this. It just gives you the output and assumes you know what you're doing. If I go down to hypothesis testing, it's effectively doing that just more robustly. It's going to add statistical robustness. So now, right, I've made a change. Have I really made a change? Can I see a marked difference? I could use a control chart to see if I can see that shift. Or I could use a hypothesis test, like a two-sample t-test, to go, yep, there is clearly a statistically significant difference here, which is a roundabout way of saying, if you've given me the right data, this wouldn't have just happened by chance. Something changed. Now, if you've isolated it, there was only one thing you changed, there was nothing else. Well, now you've got evidence to support your claim. Yes, my hypothesis is I think I've made a difference. Evidence would suggest that's right, but only if you control it that way. So the overarching advice is it can apply a hell of a lot more than you realise. Just don't overcomplicate it. It's there fundamentally to say, is what you're seeing really due to something changing, or would you have just seen this anyway, in a roundabout way? I do have to put in a disclaimer, because I teach this at Master Black Belt, that technically it's not to do with chance, but that's just the best way for me to describe it. That's easy and intuitive, but it's as close as. And the other kind of mistakes with it is, a really common one is misunderstanding some of the values. P-values comes up a lot, and honestly is the most misinterpreted value I ever see across the board, from experts to none. So even though I could be going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, one thing of anyone who is using hypothesis tests, whenever we're looking at p-values, the two key things I would say is a p-value is not the probability of type 1 error, as it commonly stated is. And it also does not tell you the practical significance of a change. It only tells you the statistical. And this is hands down the biggest mistake, and where the best use of hypothesis testing will come with it. A lot of people will do a hypothesis test, look at a p-value and go, yep, statistically different or not. And really that's a big mistake, because a statistical difference only tells you that difference you're seeing, would you have seen that in another situation? Based on probability, yes or no, in a sense. If it's a really low p-value, it's basically saying you wouldn't have really seen this. If I have a p-value of 0.05, it's effectively saying that if you did the same thing 100 times, you would only see this occurrence 5 out of 100. In other words, it's very rare. Hence, probability would say something changed.
Yeah.
But so it's not the probability of type 1 error, but also it doesn't tell you that 5% probability of you seeing that, how practical that is. So you can have a really, really low p-value, i.e. something statistically significant, but the practical difference is negligible. And actually, you have to look at the full picture. Statistical significance and p-values is just one piece of the jigsaw. That tells you, would you have seen this in another random situation? Yes or no? If the answer is, no, you wouldn't have seen this, something changed, now you then, that doesn't mean it's meaningful. It could still be nothing. It could be the tiniest change, but it's statistically different. Now I look at practically, okay, well, what is the change, and does that mean something to us? And if it doesn't, well, you can kind of put it in the bin and kind of go, well, it doesn't matter. It might be different, but it's not having an impact, really. If it is having an impact, now I can investigate further. So I think the biggest mistake, hands down, is stop looking at just statistical significance. That's only one piece. This is there just to tell you, would you have encountered this in a normal situation? If not, the evidence is in your favour that something has changed. And if not, how practical is the impact? But you have to do that work yourself.
Excellent. Niall, that was really interesting. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you today about this. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find more episodes of our Uncommon Sense Tools to Improve Your Work Forever in our Knowledge Hub on our website, or, of course, your favourite podcast platform. And do subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode, where you'll find links to more content on this topic, which includes webinar recordings, toolbox guides, blogs, and infographics, and our training page. You can always drop us a line on team@pmi.co.uk and arrange a time to have a call to talk about how these tools can help you in your organisation. We'd really love to hear from you.